Check. Call this meeting of the school board for the city of Lewiston, Maine to order for Monday, August 15th, 2022. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Second item on the agenda is school committee member introductions. I'll start with Ms. Parks.
Megan Parks at large. Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Jake Langlis, Superintendent.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1, Chair.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Paul Popelant, Ward 7.
Linda Scott, City Council Representative.
Thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any items that members want to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. The next item is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee, be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation with Lewiston Public Schools. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Item 5, to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for the assistant principal position at Connors Elementary.
If I'd like to ask Principal Ferrara to come up and do a short introduction to Whitney Rolfe, who's our nominee.
Good evening. It's with great pleasure that I come here tonight to put the nomination forward of Whitney Rolfe. Whitney is an 8-year veteran of Lewiston Public Schools, and going farther back than that, actually did her student teaching at Montello Elementary School. She was a kindergarten teacher for 6 years at Longley, and then she came with us to Connors as a kindergarten teacher for 1 year, and for the last 2 years has been in the role of an RTI teacher. Whitney brings great content knowledge. She has a strong understanding of curriculum, and she's very good in dealing with students and parents and has a tremendous work ethic. It is my pleasure to put a nomination forward and look forward to your vote this evening. Thank you.
I will add that from a little bit last year, Whitney actually was carrying out a number of administrative tasks just through her own motivation and wanting to help in areas and other spots where it wasn't really required of her, but she asked and she was able to help out in numerous capacities beyond her RTI role.
Could I get a motion, please? Mr. Beauplan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Scott. Any discussion? All in favor? So moved. Would you like to say something?
Thank you. As Dawn has mentioned, I've spent my entire teaching career here in Lewiston, where I've truly fallen in love with the community, parents, and students that we serve. I do not take this administrative role lightly, and I'm ready and excited to continue my work here in Lewiston.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for the assistant principal position at Lewiston High School.
And I'd ask Principal Radke to come up to the podium to share his nomination. who I met this afternoon because some of the process happened last week while I was away. And Karen participated in that process also. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pleased to present and nominate Rebecca Schuweiler to be the next member of the administrative team at Lewiston High School. Rebecca joined us most recently from Falmouth High School, where she was a social studies teacher and was also leading the curriculum review and reform efforts in the social studies department. Prior to that, she was working in Washington, D.C. as a teacher leader at the DC International Public Charter School, working to implement their International Baccalaureate program. She also worked in the Fairfax County, Virginia school department, high school, and as well as spent some time at Maine Central Institute and in between several other teaching engagements at Falmouth High School. A native of Minneapolis, Becca earned her BA in History and German at Bowdoin College and her master's at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Becca is also a teaching fellow at Harvard, working with teachers who are new to the profession, and she brings that skill set to us as well. So I'm excited to bring her name forward.
Thank you, John. The motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to accept the nomination.
So as the motion is by Ms. Bowden, second by Ms. Eames. Is there any discussion? All in favor? So moved.
You're all.
Okay, great, thanks. I know I've had the chance over this last week to have a lot of formal and informal conversations, and I'm just really energized and excited by everything that's happening at Lewiston High School and by everyone as part of this team. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know Lewiston students, Lewiston staff, and the Lewiston community. So thank you.
Welcome. Next item on the agenda is agenda item number 7, to receive and potentially vote on a field trip request to Stonehill College in Northeastern Mass and Wheaton College in Norton, Mass.
Kate's here to present as
Here.
the aspirations coordinator. Kate's also going to be presenting item 8, 9, and 10, which are similar items, but different field trips.
Okay, you said we were doing, first one was Stonehill and Wheaton? Okay. Thank you. We are planning to take college trips down in parts of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. To bring about 50-ish kids each time with at least 5 chaperones, 10 to 1 ratio. I don't have the exact numbers, but 50 is the maximum amount of students that we will be taking. We're hoping to get kids back on college campuses and see them, feel it, realize what their aspirations are after a 2-year break from COVID. We're really excited for that.
So this has been part of the aspirations program for many years, work that Doug had done through different grants, and we just haven't done it in a couple of years. So those of you new to the committee who haven't seen this before, it's kind of been on pause because of the pandemic.
Ms. Scott.
My only question would be, on the field trip application, it said you'll need interpretation for all. Were you able to get that for?
I haven't gotten them back yet, but we won't be giving them out until a few weeks
Okay,
anyway.
so you're all set.
I
with
have
that.
not gotten my translations
Okay,
yet.
great. Thank you.
I noticed Colby's on the list. I was wondering if you ever take students to Bates.
That's a good question. We were just talking about that with the COVID. So Lewiston Middle School takes students debates often,
Okay.
but with the break from COVID, I
Yeah.
was thinking maybe it would be a good thing to go to Bates, even though, so normally they would have already seen the campus and been there, but since no one's been there,
Right.
it might be something we need to look into.
Yeah. And they've just changed their protocols. So
Oh, good.
it should be easier.
Great. Thank you.
These trips, they're be staggered during the school year.
They go up until November 15th.
So one every couple of weeks. Is that
Yes. Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah. One every week or so. Then we take a little break and we try to do it on like split the days between white or blue days. So you're not missing the same classes if kids want to go to a couple field trips.
Ms. Scott,
I was just going to say a motion to approve.
Second.
is it? So Linda is the motion and the second was Tanya. The cost of the cost of the trips, is that covered through some part of a budget
Yes.
line item that we
The
have?
students would not have to pay for anything.
And these would not be overnight trips.
I'm sorry?
Would they be overnight trips?
No.
So it's out back in the
Yes.
same day. Okay. Ms. Bowden,
I guess if nobody objects, I'd like to approve items 7 through 10 in one vote.
I will amend my motion for that, and I agree.
Ms. Whitlow, you accept that?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so that being the case, we're talking about item 7, which is the trip to Stonehill and Wheaton. Number 8 is University of New Hampshire and Southern New Hampshire University and St. Anselm's. Number 9 is Assumption, Holy Cross and Worcester Polytechnic. And 10 is LaSalle and Endicott. Is everyone in okay with that? Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Thank you very
There go.
much.
Thank you. If no one objects, I'd like to, since we moved through those 4 items very rapidly, we have our new student services director here, and I'd like to, have the superintendent at least make her presence known to us, so we all have a handle on who that is. So, Mr. Superintendent.
So I will let Mr. Radke come up and maybe share a little bit. I may chime in because I've known Rachel for a number of years, and I think this is an excellent nomination.
As do we. So Rachel Moore is making the transition from Lewiston High School counselor to director of student services. Rachel comes to the director's role after a total of 9 years as a school counselor, with the past 4 years at Lewiston High School. 5 years prior were at Oxford Hills Comprehensive High School, and a brief long-term substitute school counselor role at Poland Regional High School. Prior to moving to Poland Regional High School, Rachel served as an educational technician at Martell during the 2012-2013 academic year. And prior to entering the world of education, Rachel was a team leader for the crisis response team in Oxford County. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Maine at Farmington and her master's degree in school counseling from the University of Southern Maine. Rachel's experience within the scope of school counseling and mental health support make her an exceptional nominee for this position. Rachel's leadership style is collaborative and supportive. During her time at Lewiston High School, she has worked closely with her colleagues her students and families to support professional, personal, and academic success. We are extremely excited to welcome Rachel to our administrative team, supporting Lewiston High School students, staff, and families.
If you'd like. So this is Caitlin Urgis, who is parting ways with us, but has worked closely with Rachel and is helping Rachel with the transition.
Good evening. I'm Caitlin Urgis. I'm for a few more days, Director of Student Services at the high school, and I am thrilled. As a colleague, as a friend, as a person who cares so deeply about Lewiston and its students, that Rachel is the person coming to take this position after me. She does wonderful work. She cares so deeply about our community, and I think she will do a wonderful job. I'm related to Rachel. I'm very sad to leave Lewiston, and I will miss it dearly. It's been a wonderful place where I have had so many opportunities to grow, but Lewiston High School is in wonderful hands with Rachel in the guidance office.
Thank you.
And so Rachel was actually approved in the consent agenda because it wasn't pulled out separately. I'll give you a chance to come up and say a few words if you'd like, but also share that Rachel's worked closely with a number of our different pathways and been an integral part in creative thinking and how to connect kids to their pathway to graduation, next step students not attending school in person, you name it. She's been very open-minded, very supportive of students in all these different adventures that we've tried to engage students with. So, yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Rachel. Thank you for all the kind words. I'm very excited for this opportunity. I love working at Lewiston. I really enjoy the families, the students, my colleagues, and I look forward to helping the school continue to grow and move in a positive direction.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, number 11, is to receive and potentially vote on the TEPG adjustments for 22-23. Sue?
So the last couple of years I've been up here sharing with you some adjustments that the steering committee for our teacher evaluation system came up with to sort of address the challenges we were having with COVID. And this year we were prepared to do the same thing. We had come up with some of those adjustments, and then in conversations with administrators, we really thought hard about where we are at as a district and what our needs are, and have come with some slightly different adjustments for this year. So as you know, our sheltered instruction SIOP implementation has really been our primary instructional sort of initiative in the last year. It involves everyone in the district. And this actually, I believe, and the members of the committee believe, that this has the potential to actually move the needle on our instructional effectiveness more than any other sort of implementation that we've had around instruction since the onset of our teacher evaluation system. Last year, we made some adjustments where fewer observations needed to be done under the teacher evaluation system so that we could emphasize observations and feedback on the SIOP instructional protocol and those practices and generate conversations. As we all know, last year turned out to be the most challenging year of the last 3 since COVID hit. And it was really a fool's errand to try and chase down and provide really meaningful feedback around our evaluation standards, while also trying to provide that meaningful feedback around our sheltered instruction work. So the adjustments you have before you are to essentially, the recommendations are that we just push pause on our teacher evaluation system as it stands at the moment for all teachers for whom we don't have current performance concerns. So in place of doing our usual observations and feedback and summary ratings, we would focus essentially just on our SIOP observations and really do a lot of work a lot of professional development work, collaborative work as administrators to really hone in on the types of feedback conversations that really matter to teachers and that really help them reflect and improve their practice. So what this essentially says, I'm not going to read the whole thing. You have a copy of it, is let's push pause on that. If we have individuals for whom we have some performance concerns, they would remain on the evaluation system for that sort of summary year. That's already in place in our evaluation system. If evaluators have until December 1st, if they develop concerns about a teacher's performance from observations that they've made in the classroom, then those teachers can be shifted away from just the SIOP observations and put on cycle again so that they can have some support in improving. So there's areas within this that still allow us to monitor the effectiveness of our teachers under the teacher evaluation system, but for the vast majority of our teachers, and really for the success of our SIOP implementation, these adjustments are saying, let's just focus on feedback. Let's ground it in that SIOP protocol. And whatever moves the needle forward on SIOP is going to move the needle forward on our evaluation standards. So those are the recommendations. The notes sort of share what we might do for those individuals who are not implementing SIOP. We would still be providing feedback with those evaluation standards, but they would also have a pause on those summary ratings unless concerns arose about their performance that required a little more attention. You have questions?
Questions? Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. So my initial reaction, I was a little concerned when you said pause. I just want to make sure that building admins are still popping in to classrooms and just sort of putting eyes out there and making sure teachers feel supported and heard if they have concerns. I just want to make sure that we're not just going to forget about teachers. I'm not saying we would, but just the way that it sounded in the initial presentation for the general public, I want them to understand fully.
Absolutely. So
you.
part of our SIOP implementation involves a minimum of 2 observations on every educator who's implementing SIOP. And that was also something that was really challenging to accomplish last year. So this is really an effort to peel back so we can put that focus to allow administrators more time to be in classrooms and have ongoing conversations. Another piece of our work this year is that each building has chosen one component of the SIOP protocol to really hone in on and focus. We have an outside vendor who does the SIOP work, working with us, preparing professional development around that one sort of component. So kind of a deep dive at each building. So each building would have the opportunity to provide feedback on that component in a really deep and rich way. And all along, we've linked the practices in SIOP right to the teacher evaluation standards. So those links can be made. Those conversations can be generated. When you're talking about, content and vocabulary, you're really talking about your content knowledge, which is our standard 2.1 in our evaluation system. So we haven't had the time or the space to really have those conversations and focus in and get good on what we know moves the needle for teachers, the conversations they appreciate, and what we know will move practice forward. So this is an attempt to really sort of peel it back to what matters and get good at what we know will move the needle, so that when our initial SIOP implementation is over, we'll still be continuing to train. Hopefully we'll be better at those conversations in general when we make the shift back.
Hi, I have a comment and then a quick question. First, the comment, I read that you'd have one planned visit from an administrator and one where they just drop in.
So
is that correct?
For observations related to
point.
SIOP, there's 2 observations with feedback, a minimum of 2. We're hoping that this will create space for more of those collaborative conversations. If somebody needs more focus on their performance and is on the evaluation plan because they're on an improvement plan and with focused support, then they would have at least one announced observation and one unannounced after being placed on that
okay.
improvement plan, which requires observations leading up to that in
Right,
order to place a
thanks. Just
teacher on
to-
such a
to-
plan.
To help the public understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many, we could go right down that rabbit hole with the details. So I appreciate your questions because they hone in on those pieces
And
that are
then
hard to
My
explain.
question, that was my comment. My question was about what is required under the DOJ agreement and if we're still in compliance.
Yes, this is absolutely in line with it. It's our attempt to get even better at meeting those requirements. But beyond the DOJ, this is best practice and a great opportunity for us. So we want to take advantage of it.
Thank you.
Mr. Gopal.
Thank you. What are the observations that are made by SIOP? What are the duration of each observation?
Well, it can be anywhere from 10 minutes to a full class period. They'll be a little more focused, hopefully a little more focused and more frequent. For example, if a building is focusing on interaction as a component of the SIOP protocol, then they would hopefully be more frequent and focused in a lot on what kind of student to student interaction is happening here, what opportunities are being created for students to really have meaningful conversations about the content with one another. So it'll be focused in a way that you can go in and see it in 10 minutes. It could be longer. We don't currently have any time limits in our current evaluation system. So generally, an unannounced observation can last anywhere from 10 minutes to a full class period. Generally, an announced observation lasts longer. These SIOP observations are designed to provide opportunities for feedback and also generate conversations within and among colleagues and across the building around their area of focus in the SIOP.
Thank you. Is there a pre-conference involved with the announced observation?
If somebody is on an evaluation cycle because they're on an improvement plan, because those would be the only teachers that would be on those announced observations, there would be a pre-conference and a post-conference. And generally, when evaluators are working closely with somebody who's trying to improve their performance, they have frequent observations that are precursed by a conversation and followed by a lot of attention is placed on those individuals who need that extra support.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Hurd.
Thank you. Does pre-K fall under this? I know pre-K kind of.
Promise does not, but the public pre-K that we have in our other buildings aside from Connors, yes, they do fall
Okay.
under this
I
as
know
well.
they're kind of sometimes their own thing.
Yeah, for their professional development and their curriculum development, they work very closely with Monica Miller, who's our pre-K coordinator. And she's so good at helping them focus in, but they are part of our larger pre-K through 12 system. And they're a part of this as well. Monica did a great job working with them regularly in PD meetings. What does SIOP mean in our pre-K model and with what we're trying to do with our pre-K students? So she's been really successful with that and it's worked out well for them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. So I guess I just have a couple of questions here on when you say to pause implementation. I understand this year's school year. Would like a little more explanation as to why you feel you would need another year. But also if you're finding that you're putting a pause, especially with those without identified performance concerns, and we're pausing this for 2 years, how do we feel it might be necessary to keep continuing to do this if they haven't needed it?
So
if you understand what I'm asking.
Yes,
Okay.
I know exactly what you're saying. So one of the recommendations that was made in May, so the committee met in May, the steering committee, which is, half teachers and half administrators met. And one of the conversations they had is, well, if we have so many, and it's about 97% of our teachers who are currently rated as effective or distinguished, if we have so many teachers who are performing at that level, can we spread them out over a 5-year cycle where they're only formally evaluated every 5 years and they can engage in other sort of feedback conversations more formatively? It definitely takes a load off of our supervisors and evaluators. So in a sense, this is kind of what we're doing. We're leading to that spreading out of it, but we're just focusing in on those sort of discrete conversations that we feel really will build a common language and help individuals see how the decisions they're making in their classroom, impact their students.
Can I just add to that answer real quickly?
Yes.
I also be remiss if we didn't add that these are constructs of law. So the teacher evaluation system is required by
Mhm.
law. There is some level of local control as long as it has components that the state has some guidelines for. So this meets that. One of the conversations that happened last year was, do we just not do TPEG at all? Because people are just running everywhere trying to figure out COVID. And we actually considered that at one point and thought that it'd be okay if we go at it at kind of a reduced capacity, but to still have those supports in place, to have people in classrooms and to still have some process around, frankly, some people who are asking for opportunities for growth, want to be making sure we're providing them and being compliant. So this year, as Sue said, that this narrows the scope so that the development and the professional growth opportunities are specifically supported. But there's still constructs in law that we have to have a system in place.
Yep. Thanks, Shake.
And it does need to be voted on by the school committee, which is part of why there's a vote here tonight.
Yeah, there's constructs of law, and the reason why it's 2 years is our Department of Justice, our initial agreement is for 3 years. So we're making this adjustment in year 2 based on our experience in year 1 to see if we can get even better at what we're trying to achieve and closer to those goals.
Ms. Scott.
I would just ask, as a follow-up, if we could just have an update on this after, a few months in and even this school year, instead of waiting for the 2-year process, that we can have just an update on how you feel it's going and how the staff feels it's going too. Yeah, thank you.
Yep, fair enough.
Mr. Bopalm.
Thank you. Our teachers on improvement plans receiving support in-house from mentors, teacher coaches, peers?
Yep. Yeah, often their grade level mentors and oftentimes the administrators themselves, sitting with them consistently, working side by side. We also have our instructional coaches in our buildings. Now, all of these resources, when someone's on an improvement plan, it's, the teacher takes the lead. So the teacher can avail themselves of their resources or not. Teachers who generally know they need to focus on an area of improvement generally select to utilize those resources because, they want to get better. And we're lucky here to have a lot of those resources, not just in our administrators, but in our instructional coaches. And there's some critical colleagues on every grade level that individuals can lean on for support and advice. It's a very collaborative model.
Anyone else with questions for Sue? I need a motion. Ms. Eames?
I need to say it, don't I? I would like to make a motion to approve this TPEG adjustment.
Is there a second? Mr.
Second.
Bopalm? Any further discussion from the board? All in favor? That's so moved. Thank you,
Awesome.
Sue.
Thank you. On behalf of the committee, thank you for your good questions and your vote.
Okay. Agenda item number 12. To review and potentially vote on the second reading of the following policies. BCC nepotism, BDF School Committee Advisory Committee, BEDF voting method, BEDFA abstentions. Ms. Paquette will present.
Everybody's passing me their microphone over here. Thank you. So these policies, these 4 policies, you voted on a first reading, and there were no changes. So they're back for a second reading. I'm sorry, there might have been one change. I think the word board was still in one of them, and I believe I did take that out. So these 4 are here for second reading, and there are no changes from the first reading.
Questions from the board? Comments? Could we have a motion? Ms. Scott? Ms. Scott is a motion and Ms. Ames is the second. Any discussion? All in favor? So moved. Next item on the agenda is lucky number 13. This is to review and potentially vote on a first reading of the following policy. JICJ, student use of cell phones and other electronic devices. Ms. Paquette.
So you'll notice in the packet, there is the JICJ that Mr. Damon referred to. And then you'll also notice this JFCK, which is the current cell phone policy. And through our audit process, as well as through the work that we did as a policy subcommittee, the current policy is very narrow to cell phones. The policy in front of you to review as our potential replacement for that is a little more comprehensive and includes more detail and speaks to more devices as well, more than just cell phones. So that's the difference between the two. I just wanted to make it clear. It's not the same. It's not even the same letters. They don't match. So I just wanted people to know why that was.
Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. In our last discussion about this in June, one of the things that we did talk about was perhaps like a parent agreement, like the same thing that we do with the laptops, like you sign off on, if your student is bringing a cell phone to school, you understand these are the rules. And I think it was echoed by a few of us. So I'm just wondering if that is going to be a part of this policy or if the policy committee kind of made the decision to leave that out. Go ahead.
I don't even recall discussing that in our policy subcommittee, but I love it. So I think that that's definitely up for discussion for sure.
I think we were really focused on getting all the right language in here. And as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember that from our meeting. So definitely something we can talk further about.
Karen, if I recall correctly, the existing policy, I think it was amended in 2012. So it's a 10-year-old policy. Not that things have changed as far as cell phone use in the last 10 years, but.
That is correct. That is correct. And it's very, doesn't give a whole lot of detail or steps to sort of lay out what the consequences are, which is what the policy subcommittee really worked on, and when it was appropriate, when it was not appropriate to be using a cell phone or other electronic device.
Mr. Bhopal.
Thank you. Would there be a phone available in the building if a student needed to make a phone call?
Students have continued to have access to phones in the office if they need to call home or a caretaker of any kind.
Thank you. Ms. Whitlow.
I know that I posed this question on Facebook to kind of this was probably a few weeks ago, just to get an idea of what people were thinking. And, obviously it's a 50-50 split of what people think. But, there have been issues that have arose in the past where, a parent has said that their daughter or whoever was denied access to the phone at the office. I don't know if that was maybe because they do it too often, or I have no idea. So that's a concern. But that's just consistency, right? Like that can be taken care of. But I just think that if kids are not able to use their phone, I'm just saying in the lower grades, because obviously the high school students would have their phone accessible. But would that be more students going into the office and bombarding the office staff? I mean, that might be a concern too, but I just want us to think about that. I don't really have a recommendation or anything, but just to think about.
I mean, I think it's certainly a possibility. If a policy like what is being proposed is adopted, I think there's things we'd have to make sure are in place, you know, the provisions of a student can go to the office and use the phone. I would even encourage the ability for students to use the nurse's phone, you know, if it's something that's personal in nature that makes sense to not be standing in the main office to say I might need something. Those kinds of things I think would be appropriate.
Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. I just kind of off of that. I guess I don't know the answer to this because I didn't attend Lewiston Middle School, Lewiston High School, the elementary schools, but is there a telephone in every classroom?
There are phones in each classroom. Not all phones in all schools will make a call to the outside world without several steps involved. They'll do it, but it can be cumbersome. You got to hit like star and then this number and then pound and then that number and then hit 9 and then dial. So it's, but in much of the middle and high school is feasible. So it's feasible. And also note the high school accommodations or expectations in the policy as proposed doesn't say that students cannot use the cell phones. It just restricts those timeframes for instruction. And so in between those pieces, phones would be permissible, but the days of asking for a pass and walking down the hall, texting somebody when you should be in class would be not allowable.
Ms. Hurd.
Thank you. Are we prepared or do we have some sort of guideline or restrictions when and if parents come to us and say, I need an exemption for this and I need an exemption for that and my child needs a cell phone for this, or is there something like some sort of policy or some sort of guideline that we're following that says medical exemptions only? Like, do you get where I'm going?
I do, but and that there's actually language in there at one point for that, but we would be very restrictive on legitimizing any exemptions through the administration. That could be a pretty slippery slope if you're holding a lot of kids accountable, but if a parent calls and says, well, I just want my student to have, we would have to narrow it down to a specific medical reason, which would probably require a doctor's note, or a specific IEP, like a student has seizures and there's assistive technology that works with that. Short of that, it would be the policy.
Mr. Beauparent.
Thank you. I support the notion that the students are responsible to put them away. At my former school, we tried to have like a little folder with pockets where phones went in, and it was on the teacher's responsibility that if 15 phones were in there at the beginning of the day, beginning of the period, 15 phones needed to be there at the end of the period, and that put the responsibility on the teacher, which wasn't terribly good. The way we have it now is the concept of assertive discipline, where here's the thing we were asking you to do, and here's the consequence if you don't. So I like that idea.
Ms. Eames.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize the importance, make a plea to the administrators and the teachers to be consistent, as you mentioned already, Superintendent. But the consistency and structure for the students, especially in the transition period, but I think always is just crucial. So I'm just making the plea to the world.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. So first off, I'd like to concur with Member Bowden's suggestion that there is a parental signature that goes along with this. I think that's a really important piece, that parents are able to see this. I have to say that I was quite surprised that we have such a limited number of people here tonight when we're having this discussion, particularly since I did see the exchange that happened on social media with Member Whitlow's questions and a couple other members too. I saw a couple of responses to a couple of things that were posted out there. And so I want to ensure that, you know, the whole population understands what's happening here and how this is going to be handled, particularly around the part where the use of electronic devices, you know, when we're talking about school policy, and we talk about some of the situations that we've seen coming about with bullying, recording fights, and that sort of thing. I think that's a really important piece that parents understand, that there's consequences to some of these actions, and the kids need to understand that as well. There's a responsibility to having a phone as a high school student and middle school student. But if you're using that to record a fight or a bullying, that's a totally different situation. And my personal opinion is there's consequences to that, and they need to understand that this is in there and there's language regarding that. I was wondering if we had any other survey or anything put out by the school department in request to what parents might think to this, or if anything was done with the policy committee, if they heard anything further. I just feel like we're not hearing a lot from people. And I know that when we first initially put that tiny little paragraph, the original policy in place, we had a packed room. I mean, there were people very concerned about anything we were putting on a cell phone uses. And so that we're not seeing anybody, to me, is a little concerning.
Ms. Bowden?
This is a first reading, right? So I suspect, Linda, that you are correct, that once this moves on to a second reading and we come up with sort of a parental, not permission slip, but an acknowledgement that, we have all of these open houses coming up and people grabbing their schedules. And to me, I kind of envision that acknowledgement being at the open houses for parents to sign and understand. And I think at that point, we'll probably see more of the public at our next meeting on the 29th.
Anyone else? Mr. Bopalon?
I'm sorry, having been in the trenches, so though I don't like using the war metaphor, I know that this policy paper is only must be enforced. It's only good as the paper it's written on. The popular teachers will turn a blind eye to the phones. The same popular teachers that a kid is missing from your class, he's in the back of his or her room. There's really got to be some enforcement. And again, I want to make sure the teachers are on board on this. Any teacher that I've ever spoken to over the course of my career since we've had cell phones has said they serve a wonderful purpose, but they're a bane in school. They're disruptive and so on. So I'm totally supportive of this policy. But again, the enforcement, if we have it go all the way through, really must be under the microscope. Thank you.
Sparks?
I don't really have a specific point other than just to acknowledge some of the feedback I've heard. And I know that Ashley had shared at a previous meeting. Some students have used their phones to record situations where they were being bullied or being mistreated. And so they feel more vulnerable not having access to their phones to be able to do these things. And then I also want to stress the importance of the consistency, but also being consistent with like smartwatches, Apple Watches, all of those technology. From an equity standpoint, if we're allowing students who can afford those watches to access their phones in classes, and the students who may not, whose families may not be able to afford that technology, are not allowed to have access to their phones, that's an equity issue. So I think that we, in addition to being enforced universally from classroom to classroom, I think we need to make sure that we're enforcing it with all devices too, not just phones.
Anyone else? Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, so I know that some concerns were about teachers having access to their phones. I see no reason why a teacher can't have their phone on them, no matter what grade they're teaching. But I know that was a concern because Megan had brought up equity. I think that was part of some people's thoughts, that it should be equitable and lead by example. But, I don't think that teachers necessarily have a lot of time to be texting their friends while they're teaching. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that aspect, but that will be brought up.
Mr. Bopalon?
Thank you. I'd just like to say I respectfully disagree with Member Whitlow. Thank you.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. I'm wondering if in section paragraph 3, where it says specifically under grades 9 through 12, and I'm speaking directly to member Parks's comment, where it says students are prohibited from using privately owned electronic devices, including but not limited to cell phones, iPads, MP3 players, handheld computers, and electronic games, laser pointers, and other similar devices at school or during school activities. Should we include the other piece in there, or do we feel that that covers where, I mean, privately owned electronic device? I'm not sure, because I would agree with you that there could be some disparity with those, and those watches are pretty, I mean, well, personally, I couldn't afford one, and I don't really know what they look like, but I know that they're pretty small, and yeah, somebody could have that and not know. So I'm wondering if that should be included in that.
So I would hesitate to include the watches because of the other benefits to them that those who have them do take advantage of, including health monitoring, using it as a watch, using it appropriately. But I can see, as there's other language in here about disruption and distraction, that if it becomes a disruption, distraction, maybe it's on the acknowledgement form that, and if your student uses risk devices and it becomes a distraction, they will not be able to have that at school. I can appreciate the equity piece, but I also think that our kids are carrying different things from equity, personal property, in all kinds of different respects. And short of going for school uniforms, which I actually would support, but I don't think that would be very popular amongst the teenagers in our community. I think it'd be hard to tell people they can't use those tools that also function for other things, but I can make the connection for sure.
Anything else? Ms. Whitlow?
So since Mr. Beauplant had disagreed with my comment, I wanted to hear more because I'm not a teacher. I'm not experiencing what you've experienced. So let's chat about that.
Well, remember, I'm the technological Luddite here of the group, which this cell phone is too complicated for me. But I really feel what is good for the goose is good for the gander. We need to set the model. I'm checking it. I'm putting it away. If there's an emergency, they'll call the office and get down to me. It strikes me as a dab hypocritical if we expect our students to do that, but we don't do it ourselves.
Ms. Whitlow?
So some of the things that I've heard is that teachers actually use their phones to communicate with other teachers when they need assistance or whatever. I'm sure there's several different reasons why a teacher might need a cell phone. I don't know. But I guess if they all have phones in their room, that they should be able to call another teacher in another room. So whatever works.
Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. So I do know, I'm a preschool teacher, obviously not in the public school, but we do use, and I know a lot of teachers in public school use different apps, the Remind app, the Talking Points app, the Blooms app, and they're all apps to communicate with the parents and share photographs and share work and send out reminders and ask questions. And I'm not saying that all can't be done outside of normal school hours. But, a lot of times it is, in their lunch breaks or whenever they quickly will post. And, as a parent, I certainly have always enjoyed getting those updates throughout the day and being able to see my child's work and a photograph of what they're doing. And so for me, I would be hesitant to agree to restricting cell phone use from teachers, because I would also agree, I don't think there's a whole lot of time for them to be using their phones, but I think if they do use them, there's a purpose behind it. And I also think if we don't have a telephone in every single classroom that can dial out without a whole bunch of hoopla, that we should have at least one cell phone in the room, the teacher's cell phone, if needed, to place an emergency phone call. So I do think that it's important that our teachers are able to hold on to their phones.
Ms. Hurd?
Thank you. So I would agree with Member Bowden. My husband travels a lot for work, and last year, a lot of the stuff that was going on in school, my son's kindergarten teacher would live stream or post it or whatever to our classroom page. So my husband was able to attend a lot of the things that were going on, which he normally wouldn't have been able to do because he's out of town a lot. And like what Member Bowden said, posting pictures or work, or parents being able to include it that maybe that don't ever get to attend any in-person classroom presentations or plays or something like that. Those are all things that they can feel like they're a part of, that they're not missing out on if the teachers are allowed to have their phones. So I would agree. I would be hesitant to take that away from them in the classroom, as long as they're using it appropriately for a tool. I feel like it's an extension of their classroom, really. So that is all. Thank you.
Ms. Eames?
I just want to say that none of that is in here. This does not require teachers to do anything in particular with their phones, just for the public.
Anything else? Ms. Whitlow?
Was this packet available so people could see this?
Yeah, the packet
Okay.
was available and a draft was shared publicly.
Okay.
But
right.
I am also not blind to the fact that it's August and sports just started today.
Right.
And so I would actually think, going on Ms. Scott's recommendation, I think others have mentioned it before too, but that what's decided with this tonight, that we put it out there and let people know that it'll be on the next agenda at the end of August, right before school starts. So if they'd like to share their thoughts, that there's one more platform to do so and get some feedback.
Mr. Bokalon?
Just three maybe concluding thoughts on this. In the old days before cell phones, I'm sorry. Three concluding thoughts on this, maybe concluding. In the old days, before cell phones, we would either yell down the hall or send a note with a student. Number two, I'd still feel that the teacher that leads by example have the least resistance. And number three, I'll save for later, but thank you.
Anything else? So, what I'm hearing is there is some discussioning and potential some modification to this. So I think we could look at a couple of different options. One is to take a motion on the first reading and see where it goes. Second would be to table it to the next meeting for further discussion. Which I'm not necessarily promoting. I'm just saying that it is an option. If we're going to modify this to at least put some language in here as far as the staff's utilization or use of the phones. But what we're talking about here is the student code of conduct. We're not talking about the staff code of conduct. We assume that they all understand the rules because they are the adults in the room. So I think that, as this is presented, this really is about the students and the students alone. So, but I'll defer to the superintendent on this for a moment.
So that's, I haven't brought it up because I don't think anybody's proposed specific changes, more conversational, but if we were to put something in place around technology use and staff, it would land in a different part of the policy altogether. It'd be under employee expectations and not under student policy.
Our next meeting is the day before school starts, am I not correct? So tabling this really is not a good idea because I believe that we need to get this in place for the beginning of the school year. Without a doubt, it needs to be in place. Do you think I'm right, Jake?
I think you're right in that, pending a second read with another opportunity for people to have input, if it's adopted, it should go in place to start the school year.
That's what I mean.
Any delay in implementing a change in this policy would be incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
If we don't start with the changes, it will be hard to implement.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. I would agree. I think that I'm prepared to push this for the first reading right now so that we can get it on the agenda for the 29th. And I appreciate that the Sun Journal is here and hoping that that's going to help push that out also so that we can get a little bit of maybe some feedback from parents. And I'm not sure, I know we have a new Facebook page, is that correct, for Lewiston School? I'm not,
It's there.
it is up, okay. And maybe we can put it out on there too, or put it out, you know, in more places so that we can get that feedback from
I mean,
folks.
this text was up today.
It was
I
up
don't know
there,
if it was
okay,
up
I
earlier,
see,
but I
okay.
thought-
If this first read, if there's a motion for a first read, I would think that I could look at how we had quick turnaround on some kind of acknowledgement form that included the wearables, like a watch, if they become a distraction or disruption, really be about parents saying, yes, I'm aware of this and I've signed off. If we don't have their signature, it's still a policy. But at least it's an effort to broadcast it out one more way. But we could put this in a quick survey and just ask people to provide open feedback and push that out through our system.
Ms. Whitlow.
When you do robocalls or mass emails, can you do like a link on a robocall? I don't know how that works.
I can via text and email using
Right,
the same
text.
contact list.
I think that would be a great thing to do. But if they click on it and they read it and they want to suggest edits, how would would there be an email for them to send their thoughts to? Or
What I likely do, well, what format has worked in the past is I use like a Google form where I can put the document itself and then ask for feedback below. And then we can see the feedback in a spreadsheet line by line.
Thank you. So I guess what I was kind of hoping to see from this was that acknowledgement form coming out in conjunction with our open houses. So Lewiston High Schools is Monday and Tuesday next week. I'm not sure when the middle school is. I haven't heard
30th.
the 30th. So that kind of ruins the whole second reading and everything. And I know you just said something about getting that acknowledgement out. Would it be worth, and I don't want to stress everybody out, but would it be worth doing sort of like an emergency meeting next week just to get this finished or at the end of this week? I'm just going to put the question out there because I really do think that this is going to turn into something that the public has an opinion on and will probably want to be heard on. And it just seems too close to the start of school to wait till the 29th for this. I guess I'm just looking to see what other people think.
That would be a single item agenda. Ms. Scott.
When is the open house again?
I'm sorry, the Lewiston High School open house is the 21st and the 22nd. So Monday and Tuesday next week. I'm sorry, is it 22nd, 23rd? Oh, yeah, 22nd, 23rd. I don't have a calendar in front of me. So my thought would kind of be more like towards the end of this week, if we could get something.
Would we be able to get it out in time?
I mean, I could push out the draft just like we did tonight. I'm not available Friday night. If anything, I could do Thursday. Wednesday night, I'm already booked, and Friday night, I'm already booked. If that's something the group wants to entertain.
I'm not available Friday either. I can do Thursday though. I think.
So is there kind of a consensus that we should try to grab another emergency meeting? I mean, we've been talking about this. We have been talking about this off and on. And I think when we consider what some of the disruptions that we witnessed last year, that everybody kept saying, how are you going to stop this? How are we going to deal with this? I think this is part of it. This is a positive step by the committee to try to get, control of the buildings again. I'm not sure that I think that this has the exigency to require a special meeting. I think if we do the first reading tonight, if that's the vote of the committee, do the second one on the 29th, it becomes policy. We're not going to get all of these parental acknowledgement slips or whatever it is. We're not going to get all those in the first 3 days anyway. It just doesn't seem like that. I mean, we get 5,300 students or whatever it is. You're not going to get them all right off the bat. And there is going to be a learning curve for the staff as well. They'll know it's coming. So I don't know. I don't see the urgency of another meeting. I think we typically have our scheduled meetings. That's where I fall, but I'm open to discussion.
Would it be possible to have this first reading printable, what the parents would be seeing for having to sign at the open house, but we can give a caveat to that says there's a second reading still coming with the opportunity for feedback from parents on the 29th. This way they get to see it when you've got that number of people going to open house, but at the same time, we don't have to have an emergency meeting because honestly, the more I think about it, will we get enough people to even get to see it if we have a meeting on third? I don't know if that's a possibility. And that way we cover both things.
Can I just clarify something? So the actual open house for all students at the high school is not until September 7th. There's a couple welcome days for kids to get schedules and stuff. I'm frantically trying to find all the dates. So the first official open house is on Monday, the 29th, and that's at a couple of our elementary schools. And then we have a couple on the 30th, and then the high school and LRTC are not officially until the 7th. So if we want to have them at the open house, if we're looking at that open house time, that we could still meet that deadline for the high school, not the other dates, not the ones that are on the 29th.
Ms. Hurd?
Thank you. So open house is such a short period. It's like 4:30 to 6:30. So there are probably a good number of parents that won't be able to even attend the open house. Would it be possible to, like you said, like an email blast of the first reading? That way everybody gets a chance to put their eyes on it, sees it, is prepared for this is what's coming or happening. And then maybe that will generate more participation on our next meeting on the 29th.
Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. I'm just thinking of all the years I've gone into schools to get schedules to do open houses. And the first thing that I always get as a parent is a packet of things that I need to review and sign, and it needs to get back to school within the first couple of days. I just wanted to make sure that this acknowledgement was included in that, because I'm not sure how else parents are going to get it unless we hand it to them. If this is something that gets delayed until after school starts, then we're relying on the student to bring it home and get it signed and brought back to school. And I just think we're going to get more participation and awareness with parents if we do it like next week. So.
Ms. Whitlow?
Do our kids go to the same Lewiston Public Schools? Because I've never received packets going into open house. Or whatever that is called. It's always the first day or two of school. They come back with a folder with all their stuff in it, and then you fill out the emergency contact, all that. I've never, ever. Yeah.
As a former Lewiston High School parent and middle school parent, the welcome days where the kids go to get their picture taken and their schedule, my children never even let me go with them because it's too embarrassing. So I wouldn't be getting the packet at that point anyways. But I do get the folder within the first couple days of school with all the updating emergency information and contact information and all of that. So I think as long as we get it done in time to hand it out to the middle school open house on the 30th, which it sounds like we can do. And then the open house on September 9th is what you said, maybe? 7th. And then we can include it in the packets within the first couple days of school. I think we'll be fine with doing our second reading at our next meeting.
I guess the one thing, the only thing I'd like to see is maybe for those of us on the committee and maybe also for the public is what does this acknowledgement form look like? If that could be posted on the website for the school and if it was distributed to us too, then we could make some comments if there is anything that we want to change before it's handed out. But that wouldn't require us to have a meeting on it. I mean, this is just a permission. Well, it's an acknowledgement form that this is a new policy that is going to be affecting the students and is going to be impactful for the start of school. And I think the way we coach it really is that this is a first step to getting, control of the buildings again. That was the biggest complaint we heard in the last 2 years. What are you going to do about this? We already have a bullying policy. We already have a cyberbullying policy. If the phones are not on everybody's desk, chances are that a lot of that cyberbullying, it still may happen, but not during the school day. So, and I think that's all. And I think that part of what this says is if the phones need to be looked at for what's on them, I think that's covered in here.
We could look at a draft acknowledgement form that isn't policy specific at all, just that the importance of being available at school and limiting distractions and disruptions, and that the school committee is making efforts around the cell phone policy. We invite their input, but really just speaking the truth of how cell phones have become so disruptive in the learning environment. It's just a statement, and not necessarily that they have to acknowledge, but right, they don't have to acknowledge or agree, but it's a reality, and we are inviting their input, which would be very soon. I mean, the alternative to this that I think Mr. Damon didn't mention necessarily, and I'm not saying I recommend, you could waive a second reading and make it a policy tonight.
Ms. Scott.
After having a discussion and wanting to have other input from others, if we waive the second reading, it's policy tonight. There's no discussion from folks in the community. It's done. So I would not be in favor of doing that.
No, and I think you all know me. I do want that other round of input. But I would also say that this has not been a quiet subject. We brought it up in the spring. It was a formal agenda item in June, and it was shared out publicly in advance on multiple platforms that this was going to be talked about tonight as a first read. And then we do that again for a potential second read. So while we do fast approach the year and we do want input, there's been a lot of opportunity. I don't think we should avoid the second step, though.
Ms. Whitlow.
I mean, I will go on record here saying that we have thoroughly vetted this policy through the policy committee. We have taken input. We've addressed it. We as a district know what we want. And I'll be all for getting people to give more input. We're going to hear the same things we've already heard, and we're still going to probably go with what we have. It's a pretty solid policy. I mean, yeah, maybe a tweak here or there, but the overall theme of this policy, I don't see it budging much. I mean, obviously the board is open to suggestions and changes, but I don't know, I feel pretty good about this. No matter what we do, the biggest thing is just consistency throughout each building. And hopefully it'll be better. I would like to see something on that parent form about supporting the teacher when the teacher says, you know, hey, your child is using their phone, believe the teacher, you know, like I think there needs to be something there, that accountability, and respecting teachers again. And I don't know if we can put that in there or not, but and maybe it's overkill, but.
I mean, obviously, we could waive the second reading if that was the case. If you policy committee's firm on that, I suppose we could. Let the chips fall where they will, but I think if we are going to have my only suggestion would be that if we're going to have a second reading on the 29th, it probably should not be in this venue. We probably should go back to Connors. Just from the standpoint of.
I would agree.
Just that would be my first suggestion on that one. Nothing more than just from a space perspective. So, Janet.
Thank you. So all things considered, I agree with Ms. Whitlow. She had a really good point there. And I do think that, you know, again, we had this as a formal agenda item in June. It's been shared, I know, on social media because I've seen it numerous times on social media over the last 2 months, including as recent as today. And nobody's here. So I will make the motion just for the fun of it to see what the committee wants to do, that we skip the second reading and we adopt this policy this evening.
The motion is to approve the policy as presented and to waive a second reading. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a second by Ms. Whitlow. Discussion, Mr. Beauparlant.
I remind the committee that perception is reality. There'll be a perception that this was an arbitrary decision made by a small group. People want to be heard. I know personally I can oppose something as long as my voice is heard, and I lose, well, at least I got it off my chest. So I would join Ms. Scott in opposing the waiving of second reading.
Ms. Parks.
I agree with Member Beaupalant. I think that several of us have already said tonight that we want to hear from the public, that it's important to hear from the public. And then now we're suddenly saying, regardless of if we hear from the public, we're not changing it. And that's against our code of conduct as school board members to make a decision.
That is absolutely not what I said.
I think
Okay, one at a time.
we need to
Ms.
hear from
Parks
the
has the
public
floor.
on this. Sorry, Bruce. We need to hear from the public on this, and waiving a second reading takes away their opportunity. It's August, it's summertime, there's activities, people are not engaged in school committee stuff. And I think giving them the opportunity when we get closer to school is the most appropriate thing to do.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. So I will put it out there publicly that I cannot support suspending the rules and voting on a second reading right now without having the what I consider to be the process that we already have in place. By doing that, we are, in my personal opinion, we're setting precedents for anybody to do that for any future policy or anything else on the agenda. And I have been down this road on other committees and elected things I'm on. I do not support doing that at all. I believe in fully having the full process done properly and through the public. So that's where I would stand.
Mr. Superintendent.
I would like to get another round of feedback. It's a short window. But I do encourage people to engage in the process prior to, and we'll have a quick turnaround on this and get it up and share the input if we have a second read at a future date.
Ms. Whitlow.
So now we know that this is not what the board wants, and that's exactly why you motioned it. And I knew that by me saying what I said was going to cause up all kinds of emotions and people get feisty. I did not say that we're not going to change our minds. I said that we feel really confident that the work that we did is, we don't want to adjust it
but we're always open to hearing feedback. So don't put words in my mouth. Love you, Megan. So I don't care either way. I'm just saying that I'd be real surprised if more people than this show up at the next meeting to talk about it. I hope they do, because we have been pushing this out, and you get a few people on Facebook that say a few comments, but other than that, and everything that everybody talked to me about, I talked to you guys about today, and I talked in the policy committee. So, but I mean, of course, like, we don't need to get upset with each other because we have difference in opinions.
Ms. Bowden?
I would just like to withdraw my motion, please.
Okay. So the motion that was on the table to waive the second reading has been withdrawn. So now I would need a new motion. Ms. Scott?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of policy, sorry, glasses. Policy JICJ.
Is there a second? Mr. Beauparlant, it's a second. Is there further discussion? Ms. Bowden?
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for speaking up about that. I really just wanted to see where everybody's head was at after hearing that that was even a possibility. I was just curious. So thank you, guys, and I will happily approve the first reading.
Anything else on this? All in favor? So moved. You will see the second reading as an agenda item on 29th. Agenda item number 14, to review and potentially vote on the teacher ed tech intervention positions reallocation. Mr. Superintendent.
So I wanted to put before the committee, and I don't know if this is something that you want to vote on tonight or ponder, but as you know, we have some unfilled positions, but I'm also looking at how we can do some things differently. Right now, we work with some community-based partners when students are not in school to be tutored, or if they're expelled, they're tutored. And for us, as a public school system, that works as billable hours. We get invoiced for them. And so we've been looking at that structure and wondering, what else could it provide and how else could we do this? And so one of the ways that we've come up with this is to potentially work with an organization like Tree Street, which is where many of these students end up to receive tutoring. And we have some Bates volunteers that also help, and they have a number of staff that will work with the students. And I was just curious, if we had a teacher in an ed tech position, how else might we use this intervention? So we had an initial conversation, and I thought we should get it before you. These wouldn't be new dollars. These would be either unfilled positions or using some ESSER federal relief dollars. There are some allocations in there for additional student supports, which I think this qualifies as. But the idea that this could range anything from disciplinary. Some kids just need a timeout once in a while. This could be as part of a consequence for reentry, which is permissible. But really, it's about having a structure in place for students to have some supports and not just be out of school constantly, and building in some accountability for a reentry and making it about the reentry. So you don't just come back to school whenever you feel like it, because the duration has ended and nothing has changed. But having some structures in place where conversations are happening outside of the school space, but with our school staff, to support those different needs. So there's various kinds. These would be the tutoring services that we already provide in these senses, but it would have more consistency because we'd have dedicated staff. And it could also be used for interventions, whether it's content matter, access problems, transitional problems for students because of families and apartments or what have you, and or students who are demonstrating that behaviorally they're struggling to be in the public school setting, but it may not be quite an expulsion, but maybe they need to sit with someone who's going to say, hey, what's going on in a different setting, and try to figure it out so it doesn't keep happening. This would be a small start in that lens, but just wanted to run it by you to see what your thoughts were. If you're okay with it, I don't know that it needs a vote, Wouldn't mind having one if you're okay with it. I could also bring it back in August. It's not something I think needs to be up and running, fast and full tilt to start the school year, but I think you get about 3, 4, 5 weeks into the fall when the kids start to settle into their routines and they start to have more things pop up, and we want to provide some different supports.
Ms. Bowden?
Thanks. So, I'm feeling good about the personnel agenda that I saw tonight. Had a lot of names, a lot of hires on it. I'm just wondering, can we afford, where are we at as far as, have we filled, I know the high school was lacking like 56 positions or something. Like where are we at now after the most recent job fair and hire? And can we afford to take teachers and ed techs away from the school building when we were in such a deficit before? I guess that's my question.
So twofold answer. One is I have a staffing update for you a little later in the agenda, but we are looking much, much better. So that's my teaser. I'm certainly still looking to fill some positions, but we've had a really good couple of weeks. But I would say I would be very thoughtful about not pulling a classroom teacher, even if they're interested in this position at this time. I think we have to look at alternative ways to do that. Or if we find the right person, maybe they can't start it yet, and we have to wait till we can fill that role before we move them, that kind of thing. This would really be like a piloted trying of things using existing dollars. And I wouldn't take a teacher, for example, out of a third grade classroom to go work in this space and leave the third grade classroom without the teacher. That's our primary focus.
I do actually really appreciate what you're asking for. And I think that is a really great step to bringing kids back in. So I do want to make that clear. I think this is wonderful. I'm just wondering if we are staffed enough to be able to do this right now. That was it, but thank you.
Yes, I agree that this is really important work, but I kind of thought we were already doing that with the reentry of expelled and suspended students. So maybe I misunderstood the way in which that process was already unfolding. Is this an additional support, or is this a total change in policy?
So this would be an additional in the sense that right now, if a student is expelled, the reentry plan kind of gets built with me, but then ultimately the reentry comes back through the committee. Some of the situations we discussed last year, certainly we can't share names in a public session. We saw repeated behaviors that, why didn't we have a mechanism to hit the brakes on this well before now? And I see this as being one of those tools. It may not work all the time or fit, because of the different restrictions or the constraints of access or what have you. But I really feel like we've got to do something else in addition to try to correct some things before they continue to just keep happening.
Ms. Whitlow?
Isn't that kind of like what social emotional learning model is supposed to do? And is that model not working? I guess that's another conversation for another time.
I would say, SEL from a construct is not implemented at this time. I think there are pockets and pieces. But I think society has put labels on things. Is it social emotional learning? Is it equity? Is it leadership development? Is it just being a good person? Is it the stuff that a lot of people learned at home for many years that is not being learned as much at home and is brought away as it used to be? So I think that there's pieces of that, but I think, those are the conversations to be had. So if you've been in 2 fights and we're 3 weeks into the school year, it's time for a pause and to meet with somebody in a different space that isn't school to talk about what's your plan? How are you going to attack school and be successful? And I think some of those SEL things would be part of the conversation. Because what you can't do is just walk the halls, grab a pass and not engage, and then expect things to be better academically. So we've got to intervene somehow. And I think the challenge we're seeing at the school is with our labor levels are still a challenge. I think we're much better off now, but there's still going to be a challenge. People don't have the time to carve out of their day to meet kids in a place that I think because of the pandemic is very different than what we've seen in the past. if you're 2 years behind academically, you need to approach school a little differently. And I think kids are struggling with that right now because they've got to swallow their pride. They've got to ask for help. And I think they need to grow some tools to be able to do those things because our teachers are willing to help. But hitting people is not asking for help appropriately.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. So I guess I need a little bit more clarification on this. So when we're talking about an intervention position, are we speaking of like taking an ed tech from the high school to go work with somebody from at Tree Street? Or I just want a little bit more clarification as to how this would work.
So in my mind, in this vision of this would be hiring a teacher who could be a teacher of record so the academics can continue in this place, having an ed tech who can help facilitate that learning, using other resources that might exist, whether it's Tree, Bates volunteers, some of the high school AmeriCorps folks, whatever fits. But in that different setting. So this isn't happening in the public school building, but these would be our employees. And when you have a teacher of record, you can do things differently by the rules. You can still continue academics. You have someone who's responsible for that and overseeing that. It wouldn't be the taking of anything would be through budget using an unfilled position. So that doesn't cost the district additional funds, or if I can find it in the ESERF dollars, I would do that first. If we sustain these, we would have to ask for them down the road because they would be new down the road. But I wouldn't take staff from our current employees. I wouldn't take from our current employee listing to fill these roles. It would have to be something external of that because of our current labor situation. So somebody new would have to show up to do that, and we'd have to make sure they're credentialed the right way.
Okay, so we have somebody new, but they're going to need a space. So where are they going to do this work?
They would work, in this case, my thinking is they would work out of Tree Street, which is where most of our kids who require tutoring also are set up for.
Right. And so
these two folks would be in charge of those same sets of kids in that reentry effort.
So I think it's a good idea, and I'm not disagreeing with, I think you're thinking along a good line here. My concern is we may get some pushback where, how are we going to help kids that don't go to Tree Street, even the ones that are always using it? So I guess I'm not sure that I'm prepared to vote on something like this tonight without a little bit more substantial clarification so that folks can see exactly how this is going to work and where it's going to work and how we're going to make sure that we're addressing, well, the child that's on Horton Street that doesn't, or I mean, not Horton Street, but on, out on Old Green Road that doesn't necessarily use the same services, but is also maybe had a disciplinary issue that came about and they're under the same expulsion situation, but they're not using those services and they're not in that general area. And I just want to make sure that we're having equity on that level as well. So I think I need a little more on that.
So in part of this, if they're our employee, there is a potential they could use our vans. Or if we had an agreement or a parent signature that Tree could use their van to actually pick these students up. So transportation is a bridge that we know we have as a barrier, and we've talked about that as a possibility. And certainly the program is going to have some capacity limitations, but the hope would be, how else can we provide these interventions to shift the behavior so that students are accessing school and other kids aren't having their classrooms disrupted as much?
Mr. Beauplan.
Thank you. I really see no negatives as it's been explained on this. It seems like a win-win. We're preventing students from slipping through the cracks. We're giving attention that is needed. We're removing students from an environment where some reshaping of behavior is needed. Qualified individuals would be my only, concern. Not a babysitting thing. Not you've put the time in. I trust that's something you would do.
Ms. Eames.
So this is no slam on Tree Street at all, but are there any other venues under consideration or alternates under consideration? Because I don't believe this, but there are people in town that believe that they don't want their child to be in that location. So are there any other places under consideration?
So there could be, but it would need enough adult capacity to do it. So we would be talking about another teacher and another ed tech. If something like this works, there's potential for it to grow. And I don't think we can mandate that kids go to a specific spot. But I also know that, at least from where I sit and talking with our teachers and how I feel this committee supports our teachers, some of the things that unfolded last year are not going to unfold this year behaviorally in schools. And so I think we have to do something to make sure that we're also trying to do some teaching and mitigating before it lands in an executive session. But I understand and can appreciate that. I just don't know how to split people, and I don't want to over allocate in this area until I know that it has some effect. So.
Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. So again, I'm just going to say that after going through the budget season and all of the open ed tech positions that were cut, I'm just having a hard time because I know how bare bones we went with our budget and with the positions that we kept and the positions. So I think I would need to see something a little bit more comprehensive as far as like what you were thinking with some more detail and before I'm comfortable voting on it.
I'm happy to put something more detailed together. But again, this would just be using funds that are unspent from positions that are unfilled, not new positions or new dollars.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. And I fully appreciate what you're saying, Jake. I understand that, but then, we just had that conversation about perception. And when we talk about our budget and we talk about, we have people, I'm going to say the things that nobody wants to say. The taxpayers say my money is paying for those schools. If you're going to be giving that money, that's taxpayer, they're going to give us that response that this is money that is in our budget, whether it's being used or not, it is in our budget that we voted on. And if we're using this as an intervention, which I don't think it's a bad idea because I understand exactly where you're coming from, and we do have to think outside the box on how we're going to handle this. I just want to make sure that we have something in place, something that shows us what it is. It's on our agenda so people can read it, see it, and without us just saying, yeah, let's give it a try. Because it is our budget. And there are a lot of people in our community that do look at it as that, the budget.
Ms. Whitlaw?
So are you asking for them to have like a job description prepared for us, or what are you exactly asking for?
I think we need a better understanding as to exactly what we're going to use for a facility, where it's going to be located, what we are. I'm sorry, a place we know where it might possibly be located, but also a good description as to what exactly this person and these people will be doing. I think that if we had it out there, what Jake just told us in respect to, how effective this might be with some of our kids that have been suspended or expelled, and how we want to keep them in that loop of having that education and access to that education. And we have that, we might get a better understanding for the community to understand where this is going and why we're doing this. By us just having this, I will be honest with you, when I get an agenda or I get a packet, I appreciate having conversations here, but I like to be able to do my homework prior to. I like to see this stuff. And I know that as a community member before I got elected, I like to be able to read everything, and I couldn't always watch the meetings. So I think it's really important to get that information out so that we can see, and not just one line on an agenda that we might possibly vote for something. And that's no offense to you, Jake. I'm just trying to explain where this, again, can be perceived.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. And the next item is kind of similar. And I can definitely share more information. When it took me nearly 2 hours to send a very short video last week, I decided that trying to send other documents was a waste of my time. So that's absolutely fair. I don't have any problem coming back with that. And similar for the next item. I'll give you kind of a precursor, but I can definitely come back with more information.
I'm not sure we actually need to do anything more than that. We just took this information. The rationale says that we could vote on it, but in my opinion, I think at this point, till we have the more information that Jake's going to provide us, we would just move this forward to and it doesn't even have to be a formal tabling motion. I think we'll let Jake work on it some more and bring it back into a future agenda item, if that's okay with other folks.
I think we may have some comment from the public if that's allowable.
Yeah, I think that we could, depend on who the public was, I guess. No.
He was leaving me down. I just want to be clear.
Ron Potvin, 291 Pond Road, former school committee member. I just wanted to try to look at something that's already in play, and that is our efforts for the outreach for the homeless that's operating out of the basement of Longley. And that was something that we put into play 2 years ago, and it's coming to fruition right now. And part of the original plan was to have a group down there that could reach out to them to tutor, to assist, to counsel, and so forth. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity here as we're moving forward with the homeless piece downstairs with counseling and tutoring, that we could somehow maybe intermingle this, since they would be in the same building and there would be some level of dual support, that we could do. And we have that facility up and going and technology available, and if we're going that direction and we're going to have counsel, we're going to have tutoring, that maybe this adds to it. So I just wanted to throw that out there as something, food for thought and opportunity that we might be able to capitalize on that's already existing.
Thank you, Ron. Ron, could you, Mike? Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Superintendent.
So one of the benefits of it being offsite, if a student has a situation in which they've been suspended or expelled, they cannot be on school property. And so that was part of the thinking of that piece. But community member Potvin might be very interested in my precursor to agenda item number 15.
So that being said, that, I think unless I'm seeing something different from the committee, 14 will just be brought back as a future agenda item for another day. And we would move on to 15, which is to review and potentially vote on 4 positions for asynchronous efforts and reallocation.
Yeah, so asynchronous is the word I've been using for students who are not really engaged with school in the synchronous pattern of schools every day, periods 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., depending on the school, with some kind of rotation. The asynchronous piece is something I want to explore more, especially with the high school age kids who have told us that they're not coming to school anymore because they found a job and they're making $18 an hour. Kids who were doing okay in school, but now just, I'm sorry, I have to work these hours. And so that and many other situations, but we'd be looking for students who are willing to engage in their academics. This might be more online classes with supports, but the request on these positions would be really about finding those kids that fell off the radar during COVID that are still in our community and seeing how we can engage them with school again. And one of the locations that has my utmost attention would actually be the store next door space downstairs at Longley. That space is very workable, has come a long way, and is I think a place where kids will go because of the staff that are engaged with that right now. And so that was the idea behind those 4 positions. And this is some brainstorm stuff, but the idea there, and again, I will put this to a document and bring it back to you, but I wanted to get your pulse on it. Those 4 positions might have a flex schedule. So they're not there during the school day, but it's more of a 1 to 7, 2 to 8, 3 to 9 kind of model. where they could be around to help students who just want some help or engage students in that, again, that asynchronous model of, I need these credits to finish high school and I'm not coming from 8 to 4 because I'm working or other.
Questions? Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, Jake, what's the increase of students that are asynchronous? Is that the term that we're using?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably fancier than it needs to, but students who I think want to get their high school diploma, but their life situation is such that it doesn't make sense for them to stop what they're doing and go to school all day. And so I don't have a specific number, but I know that our overall enrollment that took the biggest hit over the last couple of years has been between middle and high school. And that number approaches 300 in the last 2 years. That's a whole lot of kids that have just, now I'm not saying all of those kids are still in our area. With the pandemic, they might have moved elsewhere and just re-enrolled and started fresh. You know, people move and lives change. And some of those students maybe were never going to finish high school. I don't know. But we're hearing from a lot of kids who should be on our rolls. You know, and the Jamies of the world and Dans of the world, they see these kids and talk to them. They can, you know, if they're willing to access and engage, we already own the software. I would want these to be teacher positions because, again, you get to that teacher of record, someone who has the qualifications to do instruction and to help the kids learn and not just someone to facilitate a classroom. I've talked a little bit to folks at Wayfinder that do home-based work with students who have, they're expecting a child or the father or the mother. They've had some success doing like in-home type things. I'm curious about their model and how we could learn from them, but have it as a central site that people could access. That is a school space that has, again, some more flexibility around hours, and just see what could come of it.
Ms. Hurd?
Thank you. Have we also looked at, I know, one of the things that Mr. Radke had worked hard on in his previous school is a sort of program that offered credits for students that were working or doing something outside of school to put those hours that they're actually being responsible into credit hours. It sounds like that may like fall under this somewhere too. Have we looked at that?
Yeah, I could actually see if we went this route, and again, I'll bring this back to you with more detail, but if we went this route, I could see those kinds of pieces being allowable. And if they are teachers and they are identifying the standards and doing that rationale work, it could tie back to what John has already said he supports as a high school principal in those kinds of credits. And so I think we'd have to be thoughtful about our process, but I think that could be happening in this non-traditional asynchronous space and also in the traditional spaces.
Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. So I guess I just wanted to know if you could potentially create like a subcommittee to try to figure out how to tie all of this together as far as like the different pathways to graduation and how to get kids reengaged. Is that kind of like the road that you're thinking you're going down with this?
Oh, you missed a meeting.
I did miss a meeting. Yeah. You're right. I did.
Yeah, we've actually talked about doing just that. And I think without resources that we can be thinking about how that would operate, we still have some big gaps to cover. But yes, we talked about having a subcommittee that works specifically on pathways and those levels of details and what fits in the law, what's permissible, what's a school day, what's a credit, all of those efforts.
So that being said, I think that the same would hold true for this agenda item 15 as with 14. It'll become a future agenda item with more information and more structure. But it does sound like it's certainly, I think it's the right approach. The execution will really be the proof in the pudding, I guess. You know, as always, execution is where the rubber hits the road. Agenda item number 16 is to review and potentially reallocate $250,000 to continue to update security cameras at Montello, Farwell, and McMahon.
This is another when Jake didn't have signal item. So instead of dumping a bunch of documents on you Monday afternoon, I can bring this back also, but I want to just give you a walk up to it. If you want to vote on it, we could do that. Because of it already existing unspent dollars, and I know they're tax dollars, the project to do the district-wide camera update has gone in phases and in chunks. We had a rough cost, not a contract cost, a rough cost when this project started. I don't know, I want to say 6 years ago, maybe even longer ago than that. Linda, I actually think you were part of the committee that first approved the phases. So now we're approaching the final stages of this work, and we've had to cut pieces out. And one of the pieces that we have reduced significantly is here, this location. We're supposed to have a hardened entry, lamp posts, I think, in the parking lot, and cameras throughout. That's not even part of this 250. I just said that's just, the schools are our priority. So just basic equipment, maybe it'll be like Christmas to some of it, equipment and labor costs. They've come back to us and said, hey, look, to finish these phases, again, not contract, but just, we got a ballpark. And they said, if you want to contract these, it's going to cost this much more to close off this phase. And so I know we can find it because of what hasn't been spent. But I can come back to you with real detailed specifics at the next meeting if you'd like. Just wanted you to know that two things. One, these camera projects have not been completed in that final phase. And it's because we don't have the funding to do it. And these were LCIP projects. Yes. Yep. No, the city's done a great job to support this phase-in project, and the taxpayers have as well. It's just the market.
Jake, are we talking about this happening, say, within the next school year?
So this is, we met last spring, and at that point in time, we were looking at about $400,000 we were going to be short, minus the different construction pieces like downstairs here. Once we extracted that and asked them to come back to us with a quote, so I can at least bring it forward to you to look at what the different cost was. And so this is that difference. If we're going to move forward with this, I'd like to enact it sooner than later, because they're on site finishing a phase, and this would be the last piece. While they're here, they would just move to it, and so they would start working on it. If we can't reallocate at this time, there's some loose ends, but there's still pieces in place. We would probably have to fight to get them back, and I don't know if that number would be secured for very long. Especially in today's bidding process, it's
So this is the same vendor that's been doing all of the camera upgrade work for both the city and the school department, so it's fully integratable.
That's correct. And some of this cost is actually because of the level of security we operate under. So some of the equipment needed to be a certain level, a certain requirement to match our servers and student protections and record keeping and all of that. So, but much of it is just cost of additional, I shouldn't say additional, but the scope of the project had these pieces in it. Right now we're short of them. So we can pick and choose what pieces not to do. And again, like I said, I had already said, don't do Dingley. We finished some other pieces are being finished, high school, middle school. Montello did get tied in. Okay. So there's just a couple of spots.
Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. Yeah, I almost fell out of my chair when I read that earlier, $250,000. So I just want to be clear. This is money that is put out there for this specifically. If we don't use it, we lose it. Is that what you said?
No, so the LCIP, which is appropriated funds for capital improvement, runs through the city, and they approve things annually. So I say at least 6 years ago, it was approved to conceptually through LCIP upgrade the security systems in phases. And this included everything from hardening doorways, alarm systems, cameras. A big piece was cameras and the cabling of those cameras, and making sure they were monitored and tying back into servers that were accessible to like LPD. So the police department can actually pull up school camera system. These upgrades are to improve upon and also update systems so they're still viewable by administration and LPD. Without these upgrades, we have less cameras and or they don't patch in. So from an emergency response perspective, I could probably fill you in more detail in an executive session, but there's a benefit to having these in place other than just having cameras. But those costs are connected to all of those, both accessibility and updated cameras. Some of this too is digital and analog. So some of the existing cameras will not speak to new equipment, and the quality of the old cameras and the new cameras is vastly different. But that was all part of this phase-in project. So what happened in LCIP is they gave us an appropriate amount of money. And then we hit this massive bubble of labor shortage and equipment cost. But because we did it in phases, we contract by phase. So we had a ballpark idea of how much this last phase would cost. Well, we're off by, what I'm asking for is 250. We're off by more than that actually. But I've agreed to just not do certain pieces and trying to complete the schools.
Ms. Scott,
Thank you. Labor shortage, cost of equipment, finding the correct equipment, getting technical equipment from across seas. I mean, we're talking, I think this is something that I would fully support in putting through and voting on tonight and pushing this forward. Security in our schools, one of the biggest issues we're seeing across the country that parents are talking about. This helps cover all of that. So I would be in favor of, for this one going forward and voting to do this. Thank you. Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, may we have a motion to approve by Ms. Scott, so second by Ms. Eames. Is there further discussion? Anyone? All in favor? So moved. The next item on the agenda is a report from the school committee chair. I don't have a lot to report. I mean, this summer has gone by with between the negotiations that we've concluded with the CPE group, the ongoing negotiations with the ed techs. We've got we did finalize an agreement not only with the food service managers, but also with the food service workers, the two separate bargaining units. Those contracts are all signed and sealed and in place. So it's been a busy summer, and you know, we've still got ongoing stuff going on, which is sort of becomes sort of a bit of a negotiations report as well as a as well as a chair's report, serving on both of them. We have got some ongoing stuff going with facilities as well. So, but I'm pleased that where we're at. I think that the consent agenda was a bright spot. We saw a lot of new names. I don't know. I don't think I know any of the names, but I'm assuming that this is going to be significant and positive additions to our staffing. So other than that, we'll turn it over to the superintendent.
I've got a handful of items. I really want to thank our human resources staff, our business office staff. Bill Grants helped a great deal, a lot of these efforts. just around marketing, hiring, job fair, other events, really streamline things in-house that many of us will never see, that a prospective employee will notice a difference in helping to facilitate fingerprinting and talking about knowledgeably about the certification process and walking people through that as best we can. It's really been a lot of good work. We had 174 visits or oh, sorry. Oh, so one more time, Bill, 127 people visited the job fair and 74 of those have applied and are in the pipeline as hires, which kind of spills into my staffing information that I want to share with you. The consent agenda, obviously tonight for new staff, was on multiple files because it was too big to be just one file and submitted into the packet. So you approved 81 new hires tonight. So a couple weeks ago, I know Bruce knew where I was at mentally with our concerns about the school year. I was even quietly contemplating what various schedules might look like. Been in communication with the state all the way up to including the commissioner to talk about the very real realities that we're looking at 2 weeks ago. And they've been very supportive in what they can provide for support. And I actually think the state will play a key role in supporting our new staff with some of the educational programming they're putting together to get them to their full certification. I think it's a really critical step. Bill and some members of the HR team are also working with the community college on that effort, so we can find ways to facilitate that learning piece in-house so that people who are already working really hard to be good teachers don't have to pretend to also go to college full-time, because that's not a reality. So trying to find ways to facilitate and support people in that effort. I don't know that all districts are doing these kinds of things or making these efforts. I'm sure everybody's doing a little bit here and there, but I really think our team has really gone above and beyond to try to secure some things to make sure things run for our kids and to support our new staff as we move forward. But yeah, 81 new positions tonight. There's an additional 20 in the pipeline that we couldn't get quite everything checked off to put it before you tonight. So that's over 100 staff in about a 2-week window. So from our schools and their interview processes and chasing candidates and doing interviews and following up and checking on references, submitting names, HR vetting things, checking on certifications, state finance office and the business office, figuring out what position is this, where's that budget code, where's it coming from. It's a really quick turnaround. Even met with the LEA this afternoon just to talk about some things and ideas, and they're posting on their pages to try to get people to come too. And what I like to tell people when they're asking me, what would you tell people when you say, why do you want to work in Lewiston? And I've told them a little bit about my story and how my kids go to school here, that my wife also works here, that I love my job and the work that I'm fortunate enough to be able to do. But I tell you, once you work here with our kids in this community, you're hooked. You can't really explain it, but once we get people here, they don't want to leave, large in part. So we got to keep getting them here. So I feel good about where we're at. So I have on my sheet here, which I didn't make a copy for each of you because it's complicated because it was a moving target. But the numbers of open positions in different schools is really dropped significantly. We still have some numbers in special education and ELL that I hope improve. We have an ed tech shortage that is nationwide, but I hope that continues to improve, but we've got a lot of hires in. And I think that the recent contract that will recognize the difficulty in hiring special ed and ELL will help. So a piece of me is saying this publicly, that there's a $3,000 stipend for folks who come in to do that kind of work into our district. So it's an invitation, but it's also a compensation. But I feel a whole lot better tonight than I did 2 weeks ago. And I'm hopeful that when we meet again in 2 weeks, I continue to feel even better. I am meeting tomorrow morning, our team with the management team, which is all the principals, and I've asked them to bring with them their specific areas of need in a spreadsheet so we can really start to examine if we do have shortages in specific classroom areas, what are some things we can do to mitigate that and make it better? So that continues to be a big piece. A bit of an update on the middle school boiler project. Bill, feel free to jump up and chime in if you'd like. But the boiler project is going very well at the middle school. It's on time. They're actually starting to tear down different pieces, which is just as a reminder, pushes us into the next phase where we have the efforts around the auditorium ventilation and HVAC system and the rooftop unit that will supply ventilation to the gymnasium cafeteria split. And so that next phase is something we've been already talking about. So that's coming along. It's good to see these projects moving forward. It's hard to get certain things to move, so it's happening. Last update is busing. The latest update I got on busing was we went from, I think we talked in July about being about 19 buses short down to the recent number, which things could change, of 3. So we're feeling good about that moving in the right direction. Between, again, more work on the routes. Can't thank Dawn and Alyssa enough working with Hudson Bus Lines, but to go from 19 buses projected to be short to 3 is a real positive direction. So that's my update.
Thank you, Jake. That's very, very encouraging. Item number 19, report from City Council Rep. Scott?
Thank you. So we have a meeting tomorrow evening. We have not had one since our last meeting. So I'll just give you a little update on what we have on our agenda for tomorrow evening. We have a workshop on keeping chickens and bees. That should be a good one. Final report from the Shelter Ad Hoc Committee. I'm very much looking forward to that. The full report is online at the City Council agenda. It's quite long, but it's really good. They did a phenomenal job in gathering and doing the work that they had to do. We're going to be doing final passage on the rental registration program, the Lewiston Public Art Committee. We have a resolve to approve the Auburn Lewiston Home Consortium Home ARPA allocation plan, and in order to sign with the Johnson Controls Incorporated performance contract, just like what we saw here. We're discussing that tomorrow night to sign that contract with that company to start moving forward with those projects. To discuss a warming and cooling center. That has been quite a topic that's been happening amongst the city councilors, especially with the really hot days we saw the last week, and that we don't have something like that available in the community, especially since this library is used for that a lot, but on a Sunday, it's not available. So, and where we're in Maine, we figured we might as well include the conversation around the warming center too, because it's obviously needed as well. And then there's going to be an update on local redistricting of city wards. I'm not sure exactly how much that's going to entail or what's going to be changed there, but I believe this has everything to do with the census that just went through and the state's working on that. And I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but we'll be hearing more tomorrow. And that's that. Oh, and the balloon festival is this weekend. And I'm working there Friday night.
Thank you, Lynn. The next item, it would be the student rep. They're not here. So the 21 would be updates from school committee subcommittees. It touched a little bit on negotiations, which I think, we really fortunate to have got the teachers contract behind us. Ed Tech looks like it's going real well. We got a couple of others that are going to start, hopefully. Facilities, we have a meeting. We do have a meeting coming up next week. We have not decided what we're going to do with the JCI contract at this point yet. That's still under review. There are a bunch of other things that facilities is working on. So policy. No. Fine, the school subcommittee? No. Okay. No, it's not budget season, so we'll skip that then. So if there's no other subcommittee reports, curriculum, no, Mr. Volpella? No, no.
Nothing, thank you.
The next item then would be school committee community announcements. Ms. Hurd.
Thank you. The summer outreach is August 18th from 4 to 7 at the Longley parking lot. I did get a message today that they are looking for paper good donations. They don't have any of those. They are all set right now with food, school supplies, entertainment, and all this stuff. So they are looking for that stuff. There'll be a touch-a-truck, balloon animals, face painting, food, drinks, school resource information. So yeah, that's August 18th from 4 to 7 at the Longley building.
Others? Ms. Bowden?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that we had our summer graduation last week at Lewiston High School. And it was a really great ceremony and always inspiring. And I think those are my favorite graduations every single year, just because those kids really show a lot of character. They dug deep, they finished. So I was really honored to be in attendance, and I really appreciated the fact that the superintendent, even though he couldn't be there, sent a message along, and you really did have everybody applauding. And so, yeah, no, it was a great ceremony.
We'll move on to item number 23, future agenda items. We already have a couple that we know about on these reallocations and reassessments. Ms. Hurd.
Thank you. I don't know if this is a future agenda item, but I was just wondering if we could get an update on the avoid, deny, defend, how that went at the end of the school year, and then what we have for plans coming up for this school year for students and staff and so on. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Next item on the agenda would be item number 24, A and B. A is to enter into an executive session to discuss negotiations in accordance with 1 MRSA 405D. And item B was to enter into executive session on a legal matter in accordance with 1 MRSA 405-6E. So I would need a motion to go into executive session. Ms. Bowden,
So moved.
second. By Ms. Hurd. Any discussion? All in favor? So moved. We're in executive session. Thank you, Mark.